people start looking at things in the future, whether it's in safety or in business, there is a lot of value people put on the future, right? I mean, people put value on, of course, whether it's spending time with kids, which would be more more intrinsic.
Yeah.
And then you'd have maybe the value on the lifetime of yourself, the amount of money you may make, the amount of money you may end up working for and earning, and what it's going to take to retire. I mean, there's so many different things people put value on. Now, in the commercial real estate world, there's a lot of different things people put value on as well. And a lot of that is based on time. And so if you have these tragedies happening, all of a sudden, it changes the value of something. It can really affect business. And
because there's your accounting folks have the net present value, future value, blue sky value. And we all want to have blue sky value. We all want to know that in next year, the year after, our business is going to be worth 50% more. Our residential or personal real estate is going to be worth blank percent more.
You call that blue sky?
Well,
I call it happy hour value. After a few drinks, the value starts going up on everything.
The longer you're in happy hour, the more value there is to it.
It's amazing. That's a fast growth business right there.
It is. It's very positive.
Yeah.
And in doing that, evaluating things, it depends. When you're purchasing versus leasing, obviously you're more solidly vested if you're purchasing, because then you're more happy hours, more blue sky value. It's just going to fall out of the sky here. When you're talking about leasing, the value or the cost is pretty much established the minute that the document's signed. So all the parties, when they agree to 3-year, 5-year, 10-year term, that value's locked in, and that's the gamble, I want to say, that the landlord takes in saying, this is what I think the future's going to be. There's, you have escalations of 3 to 5% per year. The landlord's kind of securing their value as the lease matures.
Mm-hmm. And so really there's, I guess, some ways that people are able to, in some ways, create some safety for themselves. On the financial side, of course.
Yeah, you can. In establishing the rates, terms, provisions of the lease, there's when you step back and look at it from 10,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet, 10,000 feet.
You must be in commercial real estate.
Very linear people we are. You look at it and you say, what does this lease cost? And that's what the landlords and experienced tenants or brokers will call your gross lease value. And when you take a look at the gross lease value, that's just what the landlord's going to make and what the tenant is going to spend.
Over any amount of time?
Well, over the established amount of time of the lease.
3-year lease, 5-year lease, whatever that may
Correct.
be.
And the way, if your listeners have a lease out there currently, they can go back and they can make a spreadsheet and figure out what their gross lease value is, and that's what they're paying.
So what goes into a gross lease value?
Yeah, good question.
I would imagine it's more than just your monthly times how many months.
Yes. From a tenant's perspective, yes, because you're looking at hard dollars. Now, the landlord is going to look at, that's why two parties can look at the same agreement, the same numbers, totally differently. When a tenant looks at it, they're going to say, what's coming out of my pocket every month? When do I get a free month's rent? When do I, all these little perks or whatever you can negotiate in the lease. The landlord takes a look at it in its entirety, and they say, what are the gross rents that the landlord's going to collect? What are the gross triple nets that the landlord's going to collect? And then what did it cost the landlord, the building owner, to secure that tenant? And then they back those numbers out of it. So if there's leasing costs. You got to pay the brokers. You got to pay the attorney. There's some administration in managing the lease. Then you go back and say, now, did we give them tenant improvements? How much did it cost us per square foot to put carpet, paint, add 2 offices, blah, blah, blah. That comes out of the gross lease value. And then there's any concessions as far as free rent or rent abatement, pocket space, things like that. So at the end of the ticker tape there, the tenant's number is going to be A, and the landlord's number is going to be A minus some number.
Sure.
So that's where the kind of
the cost of doing business for a landlord.
Cost of doing business. But that's the cost that the landlord invests in the tenant. So they're saying before you pay basically any rent, we're going to spend this money on your behalf. So sometimes when businesses or tenants look and they say, well, why do they want such a high security, deposit? Or why would they ask for personal guarantee, which I advise nobody ever sign one. But that's because the landlord is paying out of their pocket to secure that tenant for that said period of time. And when you look at that,
and they're paying up front. I mean, so a lot of these costs are to the landlord up front.
Up front, absolutely. Before they receive one rent check, this is what they're investing in.
New carpet, new whatever it may be.
Paint, toilets, restrooms, ADA compliant. If the state comes in and says new lighting, upgrades, retrofits. Now, some of those are, they amortize those out. But nonetheless, that's coming out of the landlord's pocket as an investment in the tenant. So not that I evangelize for landlords too often, but that's just the business facts of it.
Right.
Now, the tenant can look at that in two different ways. They can say, what am I getting what's it going to cost me hard dollars in literally monthly checks? And what did I benefit from this landlord or this office suite in soft money? And that's the soft money that says, hey, I have new carpet. I have a new image for my business. I got a relocation expense. The landlord helped pay my moving costs. They paid my cable infrastructure bill, so on and so forth.
Sure.
So
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so when you have the broker and your team that we've talked about in the past, how you structure the lease, how everybody involved, then the tenant at the end of the process gets to have a true picture of what their hard dollar costs were, soft dollar costs were, and then any of the other provisions that allowed them flexibility during the term.
And so what I find to be kind of interesting, though, is if you're a company and you're going in and you're like, I don't care about the carpet, I don't really care about new paint or fancier bathrooms.
Right.
You're really able to then maybe knock some costs down because the tenant or the landlord doesn't have to go invest money up front in you.
Absolutely. If you can take a space and it's not critical to your business or your employee morale, there's so many other different thoughts and things going into that. But if you can take a space as is, then you can kind of reverse engineer with an experienced broker, hey, they were going to put in carpet and paint. That's going to be $3 a square foot over 3 years. You can say,
right.
Okay, that's going to net me this value. Let's take that in free rent, or let's take that in whatever savings we want to have, or just a reduced rate.
But even just knowing what all those line items are, yeah. I mean, that's something where, having somebody in your corner like you is so important because, if I'm going in, I'm thinking, okay, it needs new carpet, not thinking, well, I could use this carpet, and if I use this carpet, I can pay less. I mean, it's such a...
Absolutely.
There's so many line items, I imagine.
I kind of analogize it to that of kind of, one of those party balloons, that they make the animals out of, the long ones. There's... The amount of air in that balloon is the minimum that the landlord is going to accept. And how you squeeze that balloon and say, do I want cost savings in the front end? Do I want it in the back end or in the middle? If I'm going to get 4 or 3 months worth of free rent, do I want to take them up front? Maybe not. Maybe I want to take them every March because I know I'm going to have a tax payment come April. So I'd like to apply. There's different ways to structure that within the lease, knowing the values that you have or don't have or the landlord's willing to give you in order for you to benefit the most from that. And that's what a professional will help you accomplish.
Matthew Royal joins us, president and managing broker of Royal Commercial Corp. Matt, so how does this end up affecting, I say, like a renewal? I mean, if they've negotiated this whole thing through, they've worked with their broker, and now all of a sudden somebody's like thinking, well, geez, we got 50 people in our office.
Absolutely.
I don't want to move. I'd like to stay here. Do these things get renegotiated? Can you get new carpet?
Yes, you can. You can get. It depends on. It's the old broker adage, which when I was a tenant, I always didn't like to hear when someone said, "Well, it depends." That doesn't help anybody when somebody says that, but truly it does. When you're looking at a renewal, you kind of have to look at where you are in the market. If you had negotiated renewal provisions, then that could be a benefit. But one of the things that the tenants don't truly understand, even though you have a renegotiated provision or a provision that's been negotiated prior to the natural expiration of the lease, you don't have to use that provision because a lot of them will say, we'll renew at 95% of market rate or at the then rate. Well, that again, there's a cost of securing the tenant and you know that they're going to have 2 or 3 months of marketing time, you can come up with a formula with your broker to figure out what that value is. It doesn't really mean you have to stick with the old lease. If there was a provision in there that you didn't like or you want to redo or revisit, the landlord will call it a renewal. But basically, it's going to be a new lease. It's just all of the basic meat and potatoes of the lease term, the insurances, the subordination agreements, blah, blah, blah. All those things are going to be fixed. You're just looking at the economic part on the renewal. So when you do that, you say, yeah, the cost of maintaining a tenant is a lot less than attracting a new one. So if
who's going to want new carpet and new
who's going to want all sorts of new things, yes. Plus, there's not a history of secure payment, of good tenancy, of you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're getting. Says and that's what landlords have to face. Hopefully, weekly, monthly when they get new tenants. But anyway, so the benefit to that on a renewal is for you to have a good broker, a good firm, go out, do a market appraisal evaluation, and then, in my theory, is you deduct from that because you have a track record with the landlord. If you're in my opinion, if you're in a renewal position and you come back and get a market rate renewal, you probably didn't get the best position, the best deal you could have. Now, if the building's 100% full and the landlord could give a rat's tail whether you stay or not, then you're probably most likely going to do a market deal. But that doesn't mean you can't get some soft cost savings to you through carpet, paint, rent reduction, pocket space, things like that down the road.
So we just have a couple minutes left, but when you start looking at all these different aspects of renewing or just getting a lease, what I notice, I think supply and demand.
Absolutely.
If you drive around, it seems like there is space available in just about every building.
Yes.
Unless that's just people putting up signs where there is not space available. I have not seen a lot of office buildings that do not have some very large sign in them that say 500 to 25,000 of square feet available.
Yes, that is out there. Now, this could be a whole topic for another show, which is the economics of supply and demand in the real estate industry, commercial real estate industry.
But is there a lot of space? I mean, if anybody's looking to move their business out of their home, is there a lot of space? And I mean, how you can get a small office for a few $100 a month?
You could. Executive suites, whatnot. You can get something for, let's say, if you wanted $500 a month, because there's some set costs, whether it's small or large, that are going to square footage that are going to happen regardless. It really depends on where you want to be and how much space. There's different quantities of space of 500 square feet to 1,200 square feet, because there's a lot of small businesses starting up. So those are kind of sparse. When you get into the 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, those there are a few more of those because there's not that many of that size of company growing. Now, when you get into the 10, 20, 30,000 square feet, there's some big floor blocks out there. But then again, the cost of that is you pay for parking. And if you want to pass that on to your employers or you want to, however that works. The dynamics of it are such that it's a fluid environment continually in searching for the space. However, we've also seen that in the last 4 years, there's been limited, if any, new construction out there. So through the natural progression, the natural attrition, progression, whatever you want to call it.
Other than Google just building their own buildings.
Yeah. There's always that one. But if you look at that, they're not building anymore, and so now the demand is starting to rise a little bit. That's why landlords are holding on to their rates, just because there's no new buildings coming on the market. And if you're a business and you have 50, 70, 100 employees, you have to put them someplace. You can't move those people to your home. It won't work. So it's kind of a forced march, if you want to call that. You just have to do it. So.